Welcome to the Good Intention Show, coming to you live on the UI Radio Network. The Good Intention Show is sponsored by the United Intentions Foundation at unitedintentions.org, a virtual community where you learn to create, track, and manifest your passions one intention at a time. Look for us on Blog Talk, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and many more. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram under United Intentions and on Twitter at Higher Intention. Yes, this is the Good Intention Show, where you will meet people who live life intentionally and hear about things they're not telling you in the mainstream media. And now, here's the truth seeker, the snake charmer, a legend in his own mind, broadcasting live all over the universe, your host, Mr. Tim Ray.
All right, welcome to the Good Intention Show. I'm co-hosting with the one and only Mark Stephen Pooler, also radio host and best-selling author. And we have a very special guest today, Janie Lacey. And she's not only a psychotherapist, but guess what we're going to be talking about? Toxic relationships. When it's the point when you got to get out. Come on, start sharing right now. Hello, WDJY listeners, 99.1 WTTA, of course 101.2 in Ohio, Kentucky, and also check us out on our app, UI Media, UIMediaapp.com, everyone, and Talk 10 Radio. Wow, Mark, pretty exciting stuff we'll be getting into today, right?
Really exciting. We've got the amazing Janie Lacey, and toxic relationships really do go on so much now. So I think we've got an amazing topic and an amazing guest to talk to.
Excellent. You know, and if people are wondering, where am I? Because I'm not usually in my jacket. I'm in my jacket in studio, but no, where am I? Excuse me. I am somewhere in California, actually Ventura, California. And guess what I'm doing here, Mark? You won't believe it. We're going to the Dimensions of Disclosure, being hosted by, well, one of the main, I should say, folks going to be there is David Wilcock, but Adrienne Youngblood, she's hosting this event, and it's all about disclosing what's going on with Deep State and the alien agenda. Oh my God, am I in heaven or what?
Out of this world, Tim.
Literally. So Awaken Atlanta, my co-host Shannon McVeigh and also Daniel Brink will be here. We're going to be interviewing and recording top-notch folks in the arena, such as Steele, and you got Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of Ike Eisenhower, all sharing their information, and so many more, all sharing their information on what's going on in Deep State and with the alien disclosure process. So it's just going to be raw information. We'll be capturing it. And if you got anybody who wants to watch where we'll be for Friday, Saturday, later Friday, Saturday, and all day Sunday, is catch us on the live stream. Go to dimensionsofdisclosure.com and order the live stream. You can watch us live and see what we're up to and see what the rest of the world's up to. Whether you believe or not believe in a life outside of Earth, it's a great place just to check it out, have some fun, and have some laughs if that's the case. But do check us out live stream this weekend. So without further ado, Mark, why don't you tell us about our very special guest?
I certainly will. I just quickly want to mention that today's show is sponsored by sexual abuse trauma expert Sarah Griffiths. If you're struggling to create loving relationships and finding it hard to trust, visit www.sallyg.com for a free 30-minute consultation. So today's guest is Janie Lacey, CEO of Life Counselling Solutions and licensed psychotherapist. Janie, welcome to the Good Intention Show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Mark and Tim. Glad to be here.
Wow.
It's really great to have you on.
Yes, Janie, listen, this being a psychotherapist, and Mark, you could chime on this too, but being a psychotherapist in a world now that's moving towards life coaches and spirituality and moving in the direction of not just the old formula of the intellect, the study of the intellect, but really the study of the soul that psychology started out to be, but got hijacked into the intellect. How are you adjusting from your typical mindset of psychotherapy to this new world awakening of the power within ourselves in your industry?
Well, I think first, sometimes there can be a misunderstanding of what psychotherapist is. We are holistic, but just like life coaches, just like psychologists, one size does not fit all. And I'm a big believer that when you really are an expert and you have the experience and you have the receipts and you bring people healing, it does not matter if there's a ton of life coaches that are waiting on the bus or psychologists. You focus on your passion and what you do well. What I do see, however, to your point, Tim, is that we are having so many life coaches, which is the most unregulated business when it comes to healers. As psychotherapists and psychologists, we are regulated by the Department of Health. We have to have license and we have to have a lot of different things that regulate us. Where if I want to become a life coach, I can just hang my shingle out the door and say, I'm a life coach. So it's unregulated. So what I tell people when they ask me about different services is vet your service. Know who you are hiring, because at the end of the day, to me, even though yes, I'm working on my doctorate in clinical psychology, it doesn't matter if you have a degree or not. It matters, can you bring what you say you're going to bring? Do you have experience? Do you have the receipts? And what happens more times than not is when I get people in my office, they've already been to other psychotherapists, they've been to life coaches, and they have not gotten the results. So it's important to ask people, how can you help me? Why should you help me? And have you worked with this before? But when we're in this consumption of services of healers, we don't ask the right questions, because if you have the right Instagram posts and the right pictures, we don't ask people have you even worked with this before? I'm a business owner. I have payroll. Payroll is very different than being an entrepreneur life coach. So I'm not going to, and I hired a business life coach, and that's how I've gotten to be so successful where I'm at now. But I would not have hired that business coach if they didn't have experience with running businesses.
Well stated. So moving into the toxic relationships, and I know Mark has a lot of questions on this too. It seems like more so now than ever before in our relationships, in couples, marriages, girlfriend, boyfriend, meetings, same-sex relationships, not so much has to have the marriage stamp to it, that people are running into the wall with their feelings and with contempt, with contemptness, with anger. It seems like all this stuff is starting to come to the surface. Is there any reason why you think more so now than before? Do you see it always been this way, but now people are not tolerating it as much, or they're expecting more from their relationships?
I think the basic trend that I would see when it comes to toxic relationships, right? Every single one of us is in relationships. We've been in relationships with our family, romantic, business, all over the board. But how we do relationships and how we show up, the tools that we have in our shed, that's what's going to dictate how we do relationships. So what we have now is more consumption of information. We have free information. We have the internet. So we're seeing the rise to what's always been there, and that's toxic relationships, that's domestic violence, that's sexual abuse. All of those things have been there. It's just that we're now having it more at our disposal with the media images that we have. But I do believe that what happens now is because we're so competitive more than ever, especially with businesses, because anyone with a camera or a mic, we can come on. We now could be a speaker. We can have our show. We have all of these different things. And if we don't understand what's driving us to do the things that we do, or what drives us to be in relationships with certain people, we're going to make the same mistakes over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Mark. You had a question for her?
I think it's a great topic because relationships can become very, very toxic. And I would just like to ask, what kind of solutions are there for people out there?
So there's lots of solutions. There's, again, not one size that fits all. How you do relationships, Mark, is going to be how I've did different than how I've done relationships and how Tim has done relationships. But a couple of key things that we do see is most people, because one of my expertise is I'm a relationship with relationship trauma with people. And when they're coming in my office, if they are trying to break up with their narcissistic partner, that, I can't stay with him, but I can't leave him either, or can't stay with her, but I can't leave her either, or someone has left them for their sister, whatever the situation may be, in that moment, they're not thinking about my childhood trauma or, how my mom was a mom. So the first thing across the board is crisis stabilization, is having to get that person stabilized in their crisis, because it's a grief process. There's shock, there's anger, there's bargaining. People lose their dignity in the context of addictive relationships. I tell this story sometimes when I speak, because it was it was one of those things that put me back in therapy, is that I was in a parking lot here in my hometown of Orlando, right here that I live right now. And I was getting ready to go in a store, and I looked in my rear view mirror, and there was a couple that was fighting in the parking lot. And I stay in the car, just being nosy, kind of seeing what was going on. And when the couple turned around, it was an actual active couple that I was working with at that time. And Tim, it was crazy because, what do you guys think I did? I did nothing. I stayed in the car. But what happens is that we don't normally get to see what actually looks like when someone loses their dignity in the context of an addictive relationship, because we're working with them in these 4 walls. So that was really like put that adrenaline up, and kind of had to process my feelings around it. I did obviously address it with them, and I saw them, let them know that I did see them. But that's what happens, that otherwise successful women, otherwise successful men lose their dignity because they are so addicted to that person. They're toxically attached that things that they would otherwise not do, they're now doing.
That's a great point, though. Mark, let me chime in. Before we get into too much solutions, we'll focus on it more in the half hour coming up. But you just said something so important, Janie, is the loss of dignity. And I have to say, maybe you could share some of your thoughts in reference to the different scenarios. Because when I've seen the couples that started out with this unbelievable love for each other, right? And it's just, you're in love. You're as Bruce Lipton says, it's the honeymoon effect. You're experiencing that unconditional love. You love everything about that person. And then as the years go by, the lack of respect, the lack of attention to the relationship, there's this disrespect. And then the disrespect eventually turns into contempt, right? And when I see it the worst is when people are going through divorce proceedings, because I know, and I was one of the lucky few that my ex-wife and I had one attorney. We already laid everything out ahead of time, how we wanted everything to go with the kids and everything, and it was a smooth transition. In fact, the judge said it was the most amicable court case he ever had to sign off on, right? Mm-hmm. But we were looking at what's best for the kids, what's best for each of us at that time, and we acquiesced to whatever degree. But most of these relationships that I see go through divorce, a lot of and friends of mine, they look back and they go, "Oh my God, that was not me. That's not who I was." I mean, you talk about doing the most despicable things, losing the empathy for your children, losing the empathy for another human being. It seems to be the worst case scenario. Maybe you could speak to how, when that goes, I mean, it's beyond toxic. It's almost evil, some of the things that people do when they're in the middle of that.
And you're right. We lose the perspective of that we came together, we once loved each other, and things go awry. Sometimes it's big traumas, what we call big traumas. It's, you were sleeping with my sister, or it's the little traumas, what you talked about, it's the stonewalling. It's, now I'm working and we neglect the relationship. But when it comes time to now have a different relationship, which is divorce, all of the stuff of what people had before is coming to the table. So if you had unresolved abandonment issues, if you have low self-esteem, if you don't know how to regulate your emotions, if you don't have mature level of thinking, that 7-year-old or that 8-year-old is going to be showing up to the divorce table and is going to be throwing mud. And a lot of times people do create trauma, which is why, at the end of the day, and you said it, Tim, is that when people divorce and there's children, and we always hear these statistics that, it's going to ruin the children, all this other. It's not. Divorce does not ruin the children. The parents do. So, thinking about you and, your situation, we're thinking about what's best for the kids. So we're going to do what's best for the kids, and we're going to be amicable. But it's in that situation where, I just want to stick it to her. I want to stick it to him. I'm just so angry that, I don't care what I say, what I do, and I'm going to use that child as my leverage. And it becomes very, very destructive. And a lot of times when that happens, the relationship wasn't healthy to begin with, but people hold on to the ideal of who they want their partner to be. Most lies, Tim and Mark, are told at the altar.
Janie, that is a great point. We're just going to go to the commercial break, but I want to pick up straight back here, especially about going back to the inner child, because I hear that a lot about trauma, how it's always from the childhood. If you have any questions, call 678 495 4345. We'll be back with Janie Lacey after the break.
Atlanta, a lot of people these days imagine their retirement kind of like an endless drive in a gas guzzler, worried they're going to run out of gas. Only in retirement, it's running out of money. At CFK, we encourage our clients to think of retirement as an epic journey. And on this journey, you're going to need to know where you are now, where you're headed, and how to get there. We create the roadmap for your entire trip and guide you along the way. You can get started by meeting with Frank Kelly in person if you're in the Metro Atlanta area. Visit cfkfinancial.com or just reach out to have a chat with Frank at 678-784-4090. CFK Financial is retirement well planned. Frank Kelly is an investment advisor representative of Retirement Wealth Advisors Incorporated, an SEC registered investment advisor. CFK Financial, Retirement Wealth Advisors, and the United Intentions Network are not affiliated.
We are back on the Good Intentions Show with the great host, Tim Ray, myself, Mark Stephen Pooler, and the amazing Janie Lacey, CEO of Life Counselling Solutions and licensed psychotherapist. Janie can be reached at janielacey.com. We're talking about toxic relationships, and before we left for break, we was just about to go into talking about the childhood, how everything stems from the childhood. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Janie?
Absolutely. So we are made for relationships. We also can heal in relationships. But many times, we kind of look at from our early years. It always amazes me when people say, well, that's my childhood. That doesn't affect me. We are adults and there are decisions that we make in our current life. But if we think that we can only take the good parts of our childhood and not address the more challenging parts, we probably have some troubles in our life that we're just not acknowledging. Because from 0 to 3, we 0 to 18 months, I should say, we are 100% our parents' responsibility for nurture, for guidance, for our basic needs. And then from about 3 to about 7 or 8, depending on the research, we're in like this hypnotic state. We're catching our environment, whatever's happening, our parents' beliefs, our feelings, whatever, it's being developed. And then around 7 or 8, then we start kind of coming out of that and we have analytical thinking. So what that means for us as an adult is that I've caught the messaging from my mom. And a lot of times people don't see their own childhood trauma, Mark, unless they've had something egregious happen, like physical abuse or sexual abuse. But most of us, 20% of the population comes from secure family systems. And what that means to us is that their parents were emotionally attuned. They were present. They were able to respond to their children's emotions. But the rest of us can have undergone emotional neglect. That means I'm bringing home my report card, Tim, and my mom was looking at that C versus all the A's and B's, right? And you have enough of those experiences that can feed a message to Janie, you're not good enough. And your parents don't even have to say that to you, but it's the messaging. So as a parent, right, I'm constantly aware of that. So what happens then, Mark, is then I'm, let's say, 20 years old and I'm getting ready to get married and I'm the star in the eyes of that other. And once that starts going away, I don't realize that I have abandonment issues. I have not good enough issues. I have validation issues. It starts all coming because now I start clawing at my partner. Give me time. Give me attention. I'm critical. I'm judgmental. And boom, the wall starts coming down. It's the mold behind the wall. It'll eventually come down. And then when there's toxicity, meaning that I think Tim mentioned it earlier, there's disrespect. I'm going to talk to you any way that I feel like I could talk to you. I'm going to say whatever I need to say to you. And you tolerate that. There's probably been some level of you having tolerated that, the familiar feeling of that before you enter that relationship.
You mentioned.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
You mentioned about some people have got the abandonment issues when they've been brought up in that kind of toxic environment. So what happens to the people who have been brought up really well, they've been really well loved, and then when they're older, they end up in a toxic relationship?
Well, isn't that Janie, what you said 20%, which is crazy on the statistics, but onto what Mark's point is on this question here, 20% of decent parenting you don't have the sexual abuse, you don't have the heavy physical abandonment, you have all that jazz, but yet still there's the emotional abandonment, or like you said, you're focused on the criticalness of it. And you'll attract and level up in an unhealthy relationship or not present well. So, I mean, wow. I mean, to Mark's point, like, even in a healthy, so-called healthy upbringing, you still end up in a dysfunctional relationship. What gives?
And that's why at some point it's important for us to see where we've come from. And it's never to disrespect our parents, not to say it's our parents' fault. It's to say that I need to have a PhD in my own history. I need to understand why I think the way that I think. Why am I attracted to certain people? Why am I going towards certain fields of study? When you know yourself, you can show up, Tim, whole. You know what you bring to the table. You know the things that you struggle with. You know your vulnerability. Then you're more likely to level up and attract someone on your level. I always tell the women that come through my Women Redeemed group, the goal is that they're attracted to someone who brings something to the table or more. And the same thing that goes for men. Because if you really wouldn't date yourself, if you really know all the stuff you struggle with and what your dark passenger side looks like, and you wouldn't date you don't need to be dating.
Now that's hilarious. Let me add on to that, Mark, very good with Jamie on that, because it reminds me of that Marco Groucho, whatever Groucho Marx, what his statement was. I would never join an organization that would have me as a member, right? So it's funny how we do, and this is now I have a little bit of insight just from my psychology background and just from the years of just being contemplative on these things. And so when I go into relationships, I usually look, and I won't bring out, because you're in love, you're in that situation, you're loving situation, being phases, and you're really, I think that's the true aspect of the whole relationship, is what you see in that other person that is so remarkable, and like Dr. Bruce Lipton says, you could hold on to that honeymoon effect if you become conscious of it and you both of you allow yourselves to become conscious of each other and grow with each other, right? Most relationships aren't even aware of that concept, and so they're on subconscious overdrive or automatic pilot, right? Whatever the subconscious programming the first 7 years, as you said, Janie, is what will be played out later on in the relationships as you go forward, and sometimes even worse. So, to my question is, when I meet people, I am looking at their past behavior, if they went through emotional abuse, physical, sexual, whatever, and I can gauge pretty quickly what I can handle and can't handle, and my baggage too. I'm familiar with my baggage, what they can handle, or what I'll express at times, right? There's usually a balance where I can say, 9 out of 10 times I can pretty much handle anything in a relationship, just because it's all about processing and be with somebody who's sincere and honest and who wants to grow. I mean, then I'm in. That's to me, that makes a loving relationship, is somebody who just wants to grow with you, right? Not just.
But sometimes you don't know if people are sincere and honest. That happens a year later, and then you think, who the hell is the person that I'm with?
Sounds like Mark, you've had some experience in that. Why don't you share?
Plenty, which I'm not talking about.
So Janie, but he's right. But I mean, as you kind of know, in a relationship where you are, do you match? Do you think it's healthy to see, because your baggage is not going to come out probably until after the first 90 days you're really living with that person on an ongoing basis, and that's when all the old subconscious baggage will vomit out in itself in some level, some way. So it's not to be scared of that. It's to kind of prepare when it does happen. Can you handle that? Do you think that's a healthy approach?
Going back to that statement that we're broken in relationships, we can also heal in relationships. A lot of people say that you have to heal and be alone. I believe part of that is true, Tim, is that we need to take time to go through the grief cycle. But to your point, we actually heal in relationship. But we need someone that's going to take that baggage with us and say, Janie, I got you. But they have boundaries, that they're not going to let you, just because going back, we can have broad shoulders and take a lot of things in relationships, but should we, right? So having boundaries and holding someone accountable to their own healing, because Tim, you just said it, if we kind of look at some basic elements that someone should bring to the table, it is a growth mindset. Are you willing to grow with me, or are you saying that I have to accept you for who you are? If someone says this is how I am, you need to run, right? Because we're all evolving, learning, and growing, and no matter what state we are, we could be the best psychologists in the world, we still have baggage that is still happening. And if that person is willing to love us but yet have boundaries, because if they have low self-esteem, Tim, then that means we can run over them and we can take advantage of that. But if they come to the table, they're secure and they're going to say, you know what, I can see Janie still has some insecurity in these issues, but I'm going to roll with her. As long as she continues to grow and work through it, I'm going to be patient with her, but have boundaries.
And having your own personal boundaries too, to prevent getting sucked into toxic relationships, is really important.
Absolutely. You need to have that before you get into the relationship. Some basics, right? So basic would be is you're not allowed to hit me. You're not allowed to call me out of my name, right?
Yeah,
There's some basic boundaries we should all have, but a lot of the boundaries kind of go back to what Tim said. They're developed in relationship. Until we hit something, we're gonna like, that doesn't feel good. Let me address it. So next time, that's not gonna work for me.
It's critical, and I say it often, emotional abuse, it's like the gateway to physical abuse, right? And then, because if you're being physically abused or sexually abused, you're definitely being emotionally abused, right? And so the emotional abuse to me is the death by 1,000 paper cuts. I'd almost prefer that than a good day of a good beating, than just going through that one moment, because it stays with you every day, and it creates that Stockholm syndrome in many ways, especially for females. As you do a lot of female counseling, Janie, maybe you could speak to how women often it's that frog in the warm water. They don't even realize it, and before they know it, they're defending the abuser, and they're like, wow. When they finally get the divorce, or they finally get out of the relationship, it's like, that was not me. Who was that girl?
From a cultural standard, especially here in America, women are groomed from the Cinderella stories, the damsel in distress, Popeye's coming with his muscles, right? So we, from a very early age, get fantasies in our head. So the porn for women are the Lifetime television, it's the erotic magazines, all those other types of reading the love story. So we have consumed all of that. By the time that I meet you, Tim, that I'm married to you, I have an image in my head of who you should be, Tim, right? So we hold that fantasy up, especially for women. We hold that fantasy, and then when you don't meet that fantasy, that's when I start criticizing you, I start judging you, I start demasculating you. So what has to happen for women is teaching them to be grounded and stay in reality. That if you are marrying the potential of someone, you have already failed, right? Tim has to show up in how I meet him today, and I have to like Tim for all of the stuff that I see for him today. And if he doesn't change a day past today, do I still want to marry him? And a lot of women I see more times than not that have patterns, not problems, but patterns of toxic relationships, is because they hold on to the fantasy. I'm imagining how it's going to be. We're going to be this power couple, or I hold on to a moment in time. And you kind of talk about that early stage of the drunk with love is what I call it. They try to hold on to that stage and try to get back to it. But for some people, especially if it's a narcissist and a codependent type person, just using some psychology terms, that moment never even existed. You married and attached to the fantasy of who that person was. And he attached to, I'm just using dominant heterosexual terms, he attached to the image of how he felt himself in your eyes, right? So It creates this pattern.
You have two different self-images. I mean, literally 4, if you think about it, because it's your perception of yourself, your perception of the other, their perception of themselves, and their perception of you. So you have literally 4 different belief systems going on. And we talked about that in one of our shows called The Imposter in the Mirror. If people want to go back on Awaken Atlanta and hear what we had to talk about that on an old episode. But it really is. It's like, my goodness, how do we really get to know the authentic self if there's 4 perceptions going on in a relationship?
So there's a couple of things, and it's a process, but a couple of things. First, we have to understand what happened to us. And this is going back to our childhood. I don't believe, I'm an EMDR therapist, so a lot of times people go back and have to relive it, to reprocess it. I don't believe we always have to do that. We just have to acknowledge that, my mom could have done some things differently. My dad could have done some things differently. How did this affect me? And once we understand that, that's step 1. And then we kind of go through that. Then we have to kind of look at our own patterns. What is the messaging that I took from that? So if my mom was always busy cooking in the kitchen and wasn't able to be attuned to me, did I get a message that I wasn't important, that I'm not good enough, right? Because then it's going to create patterns inside of me.
Janie, some great points there. Let's come back to these points after the break. Belief systems. I've seen Tim smile today. I'm wondering if he's up for taking that on. Join us after the break with Janie Lacey, CEO, Life Counselling Solutions and licensed psychotherapist. We're talking about toxic relationships. See you after the break.
Do you find it hard to trust and feel you have no control? Do you struggle to create loving relationships and feel guilty and ashamed? And do you feel not good enough, disconnected, and rejected? Sarah can change all of that with and for you. Sarah Griffiths is a sexual abuse trauma expert and specializes in helping people heal from the trauma of sexual abuse. She will help you feel whole again and remove all of those negative feelings, even when you think you have tried everything. Her methodology is cutting edge, unique, fast, and it works. Find out about her free 30-minute session at www.sallyg.com. That's SALLYG.com and experience it for yourself. Every emotional issue has a solution. Let Sarah help you find yours.
We are back on the Good Intentions Show with the amazing host, Tim Ray, myself, Mark Stephen Pooler, and the amazing Janie Lacey, CEO, Life Counselling Solutions and licensed psychotherapist. Janie can be reached at janielacey.com. Before the break, we was talking about belief systems, the steps you have to take with toxic relationships. Doesn't everything come from belief systems, Janie? It's so talked about at the moment.
Belief system is foundational to who we are, because I can tell you what I believe, but you will actually see what I believe, right? Because people can profess all these different things, but if you see how they walk in their life, or if I was to take your life, Mark, and I was to put it on a white screen, all the things that we see, the things that we don't see, the things that are going through your head, that's going to make up to your belief system. And many times we're just reactive to that belief system, especially in toxic relationships, versus let me understand, why do I think the way that I think, so I can reprogram how I think, and I can truly move to my purpose and the things that are meant for me, because we're all unique, and that's our specialness that we bring to the table. Is we all have a unique story, we all have a unique skill set, purpose, passion, and we're not going to get there no matter how much money we have, how much skills we have, until we really understand our true beliefs.
Yeah, I exactly what you're saying, Janie. Because I think in relationships, a lot of people realize, or finally realize, is what the other person's subconscious programming has been, and how they process it. I mean, some people are just so inept in relationships that they have no idea that that's eventually coming. It's like, oh, everything's just going to be the way it is right now today, but eventually it's going to show its dark passenger self. It's going to show its ugly side. And to me, that's not discouraging at all. What's the only thing discouraging to me is how we process. If the person's able to process that on that level of intimacy, of really, I mean, that's intimacy to me. When you're looking at the other person's dark passenger and they're looking at yours, and they're going, you know what? I want to learn how to love that. I want to learn how to help that. I want to learn how to move us forward with our programming that we created, because that doesn't make who we are. Like, I am not my programming from my parents, although I may make actions, behaviors, and decisions from that. But that's not truly who I am. And I know that to be about that person. That's not who they want to be, nor who they are. However, getting to that moment, as I'm sure you could speak to this, Janie, getting to that moment of that, beyond that being, that spiritual essence of who we really are, how do we stay there and still work with the negative programming, the dark passenger, so we can become more conscious of it and stay grounded in that spirit and still grow with all these other areas in our lives?
So you just mentioned it, so in the context of relationship, or part of it, in the context of relationship, is we have to be with a person that understands that all of us, no matter who we're in a relationship with, it's real easy to love their good parts. It's real easy to love the best parts that show up. But is that person willing to love the parts of me that no one sees, that just you and I see at home, Tim? Are you able to love that part? And if that person says, oh, these good enough things are good, but these things are stuff that I can also marry, and I could be in relationship with, and it's not going to be to my self-destruction, to my self-detriment, I think that's when people get into trouble, is that when we are in relationship with people who is not willing to grow through it, not willing to acknowledge it, not willing to continue to repair it. And we stay with them in our codependent ways, and it becomes self-destructive to us, especially if it's in a blind spot to them, because we think we can come in and fix and rescue. We're going down the wrong path. So to stay in a relationship with someone, you know that we all have our stuff. You're operating in reality. That means that when Tim says something that hurts my feelings, I have enough maturity that I may not address it in the moment, because I know Tim may be having a moment, but I can come and say, hey, Tim, yesterday we were having that conversation, you really hurt my feelings. And me having the maturity means that I'm not going to address it when I know that his prefrontal cortex is lit up. He's being reactive, because then he can feel attacked by me, right? So my maturity says, I noted it, I'm going to address it tomorrow. So when he comes down and I'm addressing it, Tim can say, yeah, you know what? You're right. That really sucked. And I'm sorry, Janie, right? That's two mature people. That means that I don't have to address everything when I see it. And that means that when I do address things, Tim can hear it. Right. So we're looking at some very practical skills of what makes a healthy relationship. Is I can hear what you have to say. I may not understand it. I may not agree with it, but I'm willing to hear it and validate it, because we all are looking, when we look at healthiness in relationship, Tim, we all want to be understood. We want to be loved, and we want to know, are you there for me? And that's what's going to show up in a healthy relationship.
Now, isn't that at that point, and I beautifully stated, Jane, now it was really, really just very practical and beautifully stated, but doesn't there at that point have to be the change of behavior? Because if there's not the change of behavior, then that to me is where the disrespect comes in.
Absolutely. So we can all, once we again become aware, we're willing to acknowledge, and we also are seeing how our behavior is not serving us. We have to be held accountable by others and to ourselves to have a change of behavior. And that is part of the reprogramming. I have to believe that this behavior is self-destructive to me and to others, and I have to believe that I need to change it is the first thing. And then I start taking the steps to change it, knowing what I have to, because a lot of times people say they don't know what to do. So the change has to be, okay, I need to know what I need to do and what is the healthy behavior needs to look like, and then being held accountable to that. Most people don't become a healed, healthy person in a closet by themselves. It's going to be in context of relationship, where Tim can say, you know what, Janie, we spoke about that before, and you continue to do that. What are we going to do about it? Right? He's not coming at me disrespectful. He's not coming at me yelling at me. He's coming at me direct, assertive, and also not giving me off the hook. Many couples don't do that because we're afraid of conflict. We're afraid that you're not going to approve me, whatever that may be. And that comes to the stuff that we haven't dealt with yet. So we have to have the change of behavior. The first thing is our thoughts dictate our feelings, and our feelings are going to go to our behavior. And we're constantly in that motion all day long.
And it must be
69% of our thoughts, Mark, is what I was going to say, are negative thoughts. So when you think about that programming, we have to reprogram that. And that's out of the University of Cambridge, right? So we wake up in the morning, I'm looking at, okay, does my hair look good? Or how do I'm thinking, I don't look good. Our first thoughts are negative. So we have to take those thoughts captive. We have to renew our mind, and we have to start reprogramming every single day. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a one-time change of behavior, Tim.
And it must be quite frustrating when one person is doing all the work and trying to change, and the other person's not seeing their errors and not willing to change. And also, we've talked a lot about couples, but I also know from personal experience, when I used to be employed, toxic relationships with bosses when they're on a power trip, that can really affect you mentally when you've got someone in power that's using the power over you.
Yes, we have toxic relationships in the workplace, with friendships, but in the workplace, it becomes a lot more destructive if I believe I have no power in that situation. So what I do, because we do go into businesses, and like I recently did a sexual harassment training here in Florida, is we're teaching people to level up. How do you, level up, and how do you use your power to manage the person who's managing you? And that has to be a very, very mature person, because if I have a victim mentality and my boss is toxic, it's going to crumble. It's going to destroy me. I'm going to lose sleep. I'm going to be ruminating. I'm going to be obsessing about them. My productivity is going to be low. But if I believe, I can acknowledge that my boss is toxic and there's some things that are affecting me, but I can still show up in my maturity and my best self, but then also kind of look at what are the options I have here on the table, because toxic people don't come to us as the cobra that's slithering towards us. It's the python that's right next to us, and they're slowly squeezing us.
Well stated. And I find it so interesting, because a lot of people who go through relationships, and this is where and I've been in that road too as well. Is you get hurt, right? For whatever reason, you are vulnerable, you expose, you share who you are, your dark side as well. And then whatever reason the relationship breaks up, your fault, their fault, both fault, usually it's a mixture of bag, right? And then people will not go back into a relationship for whatever period of time because they don't want to, and they think because I got to go process this stuff. And usually most people don't go home and process by themselves. They just get distracted with some other type of event or some other type of behavior, and until they get involved in another relationship. But it seems like, and I spoke to a lot of folks about this as well, from a more of a even metaphysical perspective, is that everyone's a mirror of ourselves, supposedly. And so we learn the most when we are involved in an intimate relationship, almost like 100 times faster than if we were alone because of that mirroring effect. Maybe you could speak to that.
So we are going to be that old saying, the sum of the people who we hold ourselves around. So I always tell people, A players hang with A players. So if I want to be the best, I'm going to hang around the best. And that means that even with your partnership, you're going to start talking like them. You're going to start seeing things. And I'm a big believer that even in our friendships, Mark, or even in our work situations, that if we don't have friends that are challenging us, or even having a difference of opinion to kind of make us see certain things, we're not going to grow. If I'm around people that think just like me, I'm only going to go so far. So we are a mirror of the people we're around. So if that means they're toxic, we're probably toxic too, right? But if they're constantly learning and growing and challenging us and being patient with us, because I always tell people that you also know a friend is a good friend if you listen to your conversation with them. Is it all about them, Mark? Do they even ask you how you're doing? And if you're codependent, you just capture, and just are always there for other people. Relationships as well as friendships and business relationships on an equal level are a tennis match. It has to be going back and forth. You're learning from each other. I'm getting better because you're tossing the ball to me. I'm learning how to move. So we have to have some basics of understanding our relationship dynamic. If we're around toxic people and we have a pattern of being around toxic people, we are the common denominator. We have to do our self-work.
Great point. I think we do have to take responsibility sometimes for the results that we're getting in our own life. Yes, it's okay that sometimes we can be vulnerable, but there has to come a point where you take responsibility and say that I am actually accepting this happening to me. Do you agree with that, Janie?
We accept, allow, and accommodate bad behavior. And if we do that, we're going to continue to get the same. So we have to sometimes think to myself, and I've had my own personal experiences in business, is what happened here? You know what happened here, Janie? You were a red flag collector. You saw those red flags, you put them in your pocket, and for whatever reason, you didn't want to see them because you saw something else in this person. And that's where we have to come to terms with ourselves and understand that I need to have boundaries, and people earn access to us, Mark and Tim. A lot of times we freely give away information and that person hasn't even earned the access to have that information or access to us. Trust is earned, versus I'm going to trust you until I can't trust you. You watch how people are consistently, you watch how they speak. Are they speaking? Because people who are bitter are callous in their speech. So if we listen to how they speak, they have to put someone else down to lift themselves up. I have to put this life coach or this other psychotherapist down to lift myself up. When you are secure, you don't even have to do that. You just show up and you focus on your purpose.
Great point.
I read something. Go on, Tim, you go.
No, Mark. I want to hear about what you read.
I heard something good the other day, is that people can project their badness onto you, which is like projection, and they make you feel bad. But then you can also project your goodness onto other people when they don't actually deserve it. They may be really toxic, but you're projecting all of your good qualities and seeing that in them.
Absolutely. I used to have this saying that, people held up the ladder for me, Mark. So I believe in holding up the ladder for other people, but I didn't realize that I was holding up the ladder for the wrong people. So sometimes when the lesson shows up, we have to learn. And I've learned some lessons, which is why I'm so passionate about just helping the people that God has put in my life to serve. Because if we keep having those same lessons, Tim, and we keep showing up, there's something we haven't learned yet.
Hence the martyr, how a martyr is created, right? When Janie, is it a point that you see one of the red flags in a relationship? It doesn't matter if it's a year long or 25-year long relationship. When is it a point that you believe that it's irreconcilable? That people need to leave each other?
On that note, let's come back to that amazing question straight after the commercial break. We'll pick up straight there with Janie Lacey, CEO of Life Counselling Solutions and licensed psychotherapist. Great question, Tim. We'll come back to that after the commercial break.
Nice cliffhanger.
Looking for comfort, relaxation, and special face and body treatments? Then be our guest at Equinosio the Spa, North Atlanta's premier natural day spa located in Roswell, Georgia. A relaxing way to treat yourself and your loved ones. We offer custom facials and skincare, personalized massages like our CBD massage for chronic pain relief, nail care with zero-gravity chairs, natural lash lift, and more. All set in a relaxing and refreshing spa environment. Everyone needs a place to relax, unwind, rewind, and escape. Find it at Equinosio the Spa, where wellness is beauty. Schedule your appointment today by calling 470-639-1599. Again, 470-639-1599. Or visit our website at equinosiothespa.com. That's EQUINOZIO, thespa.com to find out more.
We are back on the Good Intention Show with the amazing co-host, that's me, with the amazing host Tim Ray, co-host Mark Stephen Pooler, and the amazing Janie Lacey. Before we get back to this amazing topic of toxic relationships, I just want to mention a new show that we've got coming up. If you want to improve your brain function and overall health, then check out our new show, Building a Better Brain, this Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Host Dr. Charles Krager interviewing holistic chef and activist Chef Boyan. Welcome back, Janie Lacey at janielacey.com. Tim, ask your amazing question again so we can pick up where we left off.
So thank you, Mark. And I'll tell you what, the Chef Boyan, who also is coming on Dr. Krager's show, Building a Better Brain, next week, is starting his own show. And I love the name. It's called Cooking, because he's a chef. Cooking and Conspiracies. So that's going to be one of my new favorite shows when that rolls out. Anyway, so Janie, my question to you was, what are the red flags, or what are the signs that you believe? And I know there's not a black and white answer, but you could probably give us some type of gray perspective. When is it the point when in a toxic relationship, whether it's, I don't care if it's 30 days old or 30 years old, is it a point where you all need to leave each other? You don't need to be together anymore, kids or no kids?
Absolutely. There's some general statements I'll make about that without looking at some of the specifics. If someone repetitively violates your boundaries and they have an opportunity to course correct and they do not, that can lead into your self-detriment and harming yourself emotionally, sometimes physically, depending what that may be. So when you give someone an opportunity to say, this is my value system, this is what I need from you, and that's ignored and it's repetitively ignored, that shows that there's not a certain level of respect of who you are in the relationship. And you may have to make a decision to say that this is not going to work for me, and my value system and the things I need from a relationship are not here. But it takes a mature person to say that. And if someone's in a toxic place, that they may continue to hold on to the fantasy until something happens, right? So I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. So I work with a lot of couples that someone has some level of compulsivity around sexual betrayal. And at some point, the spouses have to make a decision to say, you haven't course corrected this. You have not made restitution and repair to me. By staying in this, I'm putting my physical health at risk. I'm putting my my self-esteem at risk, whatever that may be. But it's hard for people to leave relationships in which they potentially are trauma bonded. They've been bonded over that dysfunction and they're attached to that. So to leave it is kind of like, a good friend of mine wrote a book called Ready to Heal. Kelly McDaniel, she talks about leaving these toxic relationships, addictive relationships, like chewing glass, right? Which is why people get back into these patterns, because the detox phase of a toxic relationship is very difficult for a lot of people. Unless we've experienced it, we don't understand it.
Beautifully stated. And I think when people do get to that point, because it's so much tougher. Like if you've been in a relationship for 25 years, and all of a sudden, say you're watching the show, you're like, whoa, those red flags went up, 15 years ago, and I did nothing about it. But it's now you're caught into many women in a Stockholm syndrome where they're just so used to the abuse that it's not only accepted, but it's actually preferred in a very sick way, because they don't feel comfortable unless their self-esteem is being beaten down, or they're physically they'll act up to get attention and get the physical abuse, whatever it may be. It becomes a very sick cycle when there's day after day after day of this type of abuse that's really almost either couple's conscious of, which is more common than ever. What's your advice for those folks who are just waking up to, wow, I never knew I was being abused all these years?
It's hard for some people to hear. So working with couples that have been married 25, 30, 45 years, the signs are always there, but the partner who has now woken up, they've been addicted to denial. And it's hard sometimes for people to hear that, but it's the truth, in the sense that I have a picture of the white picket fence and this is how it should be. And even though it doesn't match up to these, or there's some cues and things I've addressed, that I've been afraid to really dive in and address it, because you know what, Tim? That means I got to do something about it. So I'd rather keep my picture together. I'd rather keep my family together. I'd rather let the church people know that we're still coming to Sunday church, whatever it may be. So when we look at that, PTSD, Stockholm syndrome is just kind of used to low standard living. I'm used to like not getting my emotional needs met. I get it through the kids. I mean, it kind of creates a whole level of dysfunction. But because we don't see the bruise, it's hard for sometimes people to see it. But there's denial. And then there's a lack of, you know what, I don't have enough self-esteem within myself to realize that I deserve more than whatever this may be. And that doesn't make a difference if you're 5 years, 25 years, 30 years. It makes it a lot harder the longer you've been married, because you've not only created a business together, right? Assets, children, all this other stuff. So it becomes harder to separate. But time and time again, when I look at the couples that I work with that are late marriages, this person who's on the recipient end of the hurt, they always go back and say, I see it. It was always there.
Yeah, it's sad, but yet what a relief, because even in the last 2 years of my marriage, it was contemptuous enough where we were arguing and fighting, and the kids were, they're picking up on all this, right? And we weren't even intimate at that point, but we were staying together for the most part because for the kids, and on my end, and I don't blame my ex, or she, whether she blames me or not, I don't know. But my point is, we had a very amicable process, because we realized we were not friends anymore. We started out as great friends, became lovers, got married, and lost our friendship in there, first thing to go. And then of course you lose your intimate, loving relationship. And then at the end, it was like, oh, what are we doing? And staying for the kids' sake, for me, it made sense. At least, I wanted to see my kids every day. My kids were young, 3, 5, 3, 6 years old, right? But when I realized the pain was so strong enough on both our ends to finally get through it, I realized when I was with my kids alone, I was present. When I was with my kids with my ex, I wasn't present. So I really, truly had a better relationship with my children, because the situation. It was because my mindset was right. It was healthier. It was, wow, I want to be present with the kids. And of course I had to more so, but I wanted to be. And it was a whole nother experience that I would have never known in the middle of that drama of the battlefield of a relationship gone bad.
And that's what they call the gift of divorce, Tim, is that truly that is a gift, because when you're healthy individuals, that is one of the things that can come, is that they don't have the feeling of the parents' tension, or, we're just trying to avoid each other, that when dad is here, I truly have dad. And that's why divorces do not have to destroy kids, is that there can be, as long as there's going to be a change, right? But as long as they now have the love, the nurture, the time, the attention, their feelings are not denied, right? The more times our kids' feelings are denied, oh, they'll be okay, versus going to little Johnny and say, how are you doing now that mom and I are not together? Most people don't want to ask that question because they don't want to hear the response, versus don't change your children's reality. And I can just hear, and I think that's a role model for all your listeners, that you can be a great parent and still show up in the sake of in the aftermath of divorce, and your children can even thrive. There are kids that I work with that are thriving more than kids that are with their family, their dysfunctional parents.
I was going to say it can be an expensive gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mark, doesn't Janie have some events coming up, and what is she up to these days?
We want to know a little bit about what you're up to, Janie. You've got an amazing podcast. You don't only deal with relationships. Tell us a little bit before we close out of the show today.
Yep, absolutely. So Life Unscripted, we're having our second season. We're kicking off October 1st with new, bigger guests. I mean, we are just amazed at the people that we are having on our show. The premise of our show is, yes, I'm a psychotherapist, and my co-host is Melanie Garcia, who is a life coach, and we bring the best of counseling and coaching together to interview our guests on their breakdowns, their breakthroughs, and what has made them that success that we see on screen. Because many times, Mark and Tim, we can see people in their success, but we don't see the grunt and the hard work, the sacrifice, and even the breakdown to have gotten them to where they have gotten to. Because we're in a fruit picker society. People want to see what Mark and Tim are doing on Facebook, and I just want to pick their fruit, but I don't want to bury my own roots and grow my own tree. So we are using people's wisdom to get them to the next level. So, I have that going on. And then Women Redeem, we have a Women Redeem weekend, experiential weekend that's coming up in October, where the women are coming that are trying to detox from relationships. We're doing equine therapy. This is a private invite only. So if people really feel like they're a good fit, we're happy to do an assessment with them. And then I'm also having a kickoff group for detox. So the detox, it's the back walking away that, people need to kind of get through. Accountability group. We're doing this online through Zoom for women that need support to get through toxic relationships. We have a couple programs going on. And I travel I'm a part of an international training group. So I also train those that are dealing with toxic love and sex addiction relationships with women. And that's the ITAP organization. Patrick Carnes, it's a phenomenal organization. Many different books and literature comes out of how to help this particular group.
Amazing. I just want to say, Janie, today's show has been so informative, and people watching who've been in toxic relationships, it's going to be so helpful to them, because you have really given lots and lots of wisdom. Lastly, how can people get a hold of you? How can people follow you? How can people connect with you?
Absolutely. On all the social media networks, I'm at Janie Lacy. That's JANIE LACY. And at lifecounseling.solutions.com, janielacy.com. So they can find me on any of the outlets at janielacy.com.
You have been an incredible guest today. Tim, is there anything you would like to finish off with?
Yeah, two things. I want to say, Janie, I am just so excited the information you shared. And guys, go back to our app, uimediaapp.com, rewatch this again, and make sure you share it out there, because this is something that relationships, guys, I think everything's salvageable. And I think Janie does too, that we can move forward if we choose to grow conscious with each other. And again, last thing, thank you, Janie. Last thing, guys, catch us on live stream at Dimensions Disclosure of disclosure.com this weekend. And Awaken Atlanta will be there sharing and asking questions to these top ufologists in the world. If you want to have some fun, come join us. So thank you again, Janie. And thank you again, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Until next time, thank you, Janie, for being such an incredible guest. Janie Lacy at janielacy.com, CEO of Life Counseling Solutions and licensed psychotherapist. Until next time on The Good Intentions Show, bye for now.
You have been listening to The Good Intentions Show on the UI Radio Network. The Good Intentions Show is sponsored by the United Intentions Foundation at unitedintentions.org. Look for us on Blog Talk, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and many more. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram under United Intentions, and on Twitter at Higher Intention. Be sure to log on to unitedintentions.org, a virtual community where you learn to create, track, and manifest your passions, one intention at a time. Have a wonderful day, and until next time, live life with intent. The United Intentions Foundation and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.